Now, before sort of proceeding, I just want to clarify that these are examples from older students. And so I would just like to encourage everyone to use these examples not verbatim, but rather as just inspiration and rather just as ways to generate your own independent ideas. This is on Zoom, and so I just want to make sure that everyone's academic work is protected. And so I just wanted to make that note. Again, reusing or recycling anything that you see explicitly through here will not be a good representation of your application because these are old examples and old prompts. So I just wanted to say that. Just with respect to my introduction, so I've been working at Kweller Prep since 2016. I'm currently a platinum tutor, and throughout that time, I've helped students in standardized testing, resume building, college application help, whether that's the written aspect or college application interviews. Um, Everything within college application, whether it's a personal statement, which we had a session on last week, or whether it's supplements or anything else I can assist with. And so our purpose for these webinars are sort of really just to support students and families in this busy time that's marking the end of the academic year and also the winter holidays. With a lot of these applications due at the beginning of really January, I think time management is really important. And I think that's something that I really want to get across today. Because unfortunately, with everything going on, I think students can really procrastinate, the college applications process, and things can get unnecessarily stressful. Just to move forward, what is really the goal of college supplements? So each college will oftentimes have their own individual questions that they want you to answer through the supplements. What is sort of the goal of that writing process, or what is the goal of them having you answer those questions? The goal, I would say, is multifold. You want to give an understanding of who you are. So what I mean by that is you do not necessarily want to use this space to regurgitate your resume. That is probably one of the biggest mistakes that I see is that, students who are extremely accomplished and students who have, participated in multiple activities or extracurriculars, etc. Um, they have this sort of sometimes tendency to repeat their activities, their accomplishments in the supplemental section. And why is that something that I recommend against? There are a few reasons for that. You already have the space on the Common App itself to describe your activities and accomplishments. And so reusing space for supplements to do the same thing is not only making your application sound repetitive, it's wasting an opportunity for you to share something more personable or unique about yourself to the admissions committee. So it's not the best use, while I understand that there are, the space is limited on the resume section of the Common App, again, I don't necessarily think that, every question should be a regurgitation of your resume. Obviously, if there's something incredibly important to you, like a theme, like whether that's working with diverse populations, whether that's like art, music, things like that, you can sort of take those themes and highlight them through your responses. But what I don't recommend is sort of saying for every single, section, when I did so and so activity, I learned this. When I did so and so activity, I learned this. You can sort of show what things are important to you without necessarily repeating the fact that you did something or did an activity in those realms. If you have something personal that can illustrate that example, I think that would be ideal. And again, this is the whole reason why we're sort of going through examples to show how you can find that balance between perhaps mentioning something that you did academically in a more personal way. Um, and this sort of goes into like not only conveying an idea of who you are, but where your interests lie. So for example, a student who has, a lot of work or who has a lot of resume stuff that centers around journalism, for example, you want to make sure that that resume aligns with what you're saying on your application. So, like for example, if my resume is completely, humanities based, and in my written section, I'm saying that I want to be like a cardiologist, those things are not necessarily aligning. So you want to make sure that your interest that you sort of have demonstrated through your activities, that you've demonstrated through your personal statement, aligns well with the supplement too, because again, all these things are going to be read as a package together. And so you want to make sure that you're packaging yourself in a way that just makes sense and doesn't raise any questions. And actually, like for the college application, like I do recommend like don't necessarily tie yourself to a particular career or a particular major. I think it's much better to be more open and explore sort of the option that you have in college. And I think it's important to make sure that you're not tying yourself down or making yourself sound too narrow-minded in your supplements or other works as well. Um, Other aspects of the college supplement that I think people should try their best to um, emulate is trying to find this balance between describing your skills and what you bring to the table, and also sort of making things school specific, and making sure that you're able to tie in why this school would be a good fit for you and why you can, or why or how you can contribute to the school. So again, like the best place to find this would be like the school's website. And, I think sometimes students struggle really hard with finding like, oh my God, like so and so school sounds kind of similar to so and so school. Like school, for example, I went to Barnard College, which is a liberal arts women's college, part of Columbia University. So Barnard is a women's college, and there are many other women's colleges as well. But the trick was that I need to find what resonates with me and what connects me and Barnard and elaborate on that. So that is the most important thing, that you sort of carefully explore the school's website and find a way to tie your own sort of personal connections to the school or academic reason, and elaborate on that. And obviously, we want to all sort of do all of this while keeping in mind structure, content, presentation, and formatting. I think the supplements, can be deceiving, and this is sort of why I really want to emphasize time management throughout this entire discussion. The supplements can be very look misleading in that some of them can be 100 words, 150 words, 200 words, 250 words. And I think a lot of students think that, oh, it's so much shorter, and that's why it won't necessarily take that long to write. But I think that's a very big misconception a lot of times, because you want to fit in so much information within a smaller word count. It's a little bit actually harder to draft your supplements because you have to be very careful with the word choice that you use and just the way that you structure everything. So, it's really important to, again, just start these early and keep all these things in mind, that your goal is to do all of this, but again, within a limited word count. And ultimately, based on the count, you might have to vary your approach to the question, but that's exactly why it's very important to start in a timely fashion. And sort of the last thing that I'll just mention, just as we're talking about ways to keep ourselves organized and on time, is I would definitely recommend that students do this in like an organized way. So for my and the reason for that is because a lot of schools replicate or use very similar prompts that you can recycle. So for a lot of schools have a prompt that sort of asks you how you envision diversity applying to your life, or what diverse experiences you bring and carry with you to the school. Rather than drafting a different response for each and every one of them, you want to make sure you're staying organized enough that you have like a base or a basic skeleton response drafted, and you're editing it, or sort of adding onto it or taking off from it based on the word count that you are working with. So very important to stay organized. Use a word processor, either Microsoft Word or Google Docs, and just have like folders for each and every college you're applying to, and just keep track of what their prompts are, what you've drafted, etc. Just like in terms of very basic things. So again, the supplement is a very short piece of work. And so things like spelling and grammar, formatting, overall organization, um, how clear it is are very important. You have a very limited space to do something, and sort of tell a story. And so you really want to um, use that space to the best of your ability. And lastly, sort of these are things that I've touched on somewhat, is you want that these supplements are sort of building a theme that demonstrates your sort of mission, or what you hope to do with the education that the school will provide you. You want to make sure that it's cohesive and that it supports everything you've done so far, and not necessarily, quite different. And you want to make sure that, it's not overly um, general, in that it doesn't sound like this could apply to any other school. And it looks like, you have done work in researching the school itself. So with that, I'm gonna quickly go through some supplemental prompts that I submitted to Barnard College. And the way that we're gonna do this is I'm just gonna have give people a couple minutes to read through the prompt in isolation, and I'll sort of pick out, I think, key points that I want people to look at. And we'll sort of continue this with multiple supplements to multiple different schools that other students have drafted as well. So with that, I'm just going to give everyone a few minutes to take a read at this. And then once people are done, if they can just put that in the chat box, that would be great so that I can get started. Rather than reading this out loud and not being the most efficient use of our time, I think it will be more efficient if people read this on their own and then we sort of highlight the salient and key points. So I'll let people starting to take a read now. And again, if people are done reading, if they can just comment that in the chat so we're not spending too much time just reading. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and get started. I think the first sort of key point to responding to a supplemental question well, and this was something that I touched on last week with the Common App, is I think it's very important to dissect the question and really how it can apply to your own life or what it means for you. So this question was, I think, a question that can be taken in many different angles and directions. Tell us about a time that you majored in unafraid. So that really sort of is a very broad question and can look different for different people. The question is basically asking, like, tell us about a time where you demonstrated, courage or being fearless, etc. Um, I think something important is that, this question could have had many creative responses. It could have been something very literal about someone being, not afraid of maybe a bug or something like that. It can even be something as creative as someone deciding to go on a roller coaster and sort of facing their fear. Really, there are many, many personal examples that you can take with this. But like I said, something important is that, you want to find this balance between showing your accomplishments and telling a story. So, this sort of supplement is describing my time as a student journalist at my school, Townsend Harris. Rather than sort of regurgitating, my role is that of a managing editor and I write articles and I publish articles online and they're printed, etc. I sort of really take a more, you know, in the scene approach and I walk through like sort of what is going on in the actual moment. So that is sort of the difference between what they say is showing versus telling. Rather than telling people that I am a writer and I am writing about XYZ topic, I'm really bringing them into the scene itself. And again, I purposely did this and I chose this topic because this was something actively going on while I was applying to college, and it wasn't necessarily completely on my resume, but an um but a conversation that or like an accomplishment that I wanted to highlight in my application. So it wasn't formally on my resume because this was actively developing, but that is specifically why I chose this topic to like highlight my accomplishment or like my journalistic work here. Another thing that I want to highlight is like the fact that in order to make clear that for me this was majoring in unafraid, because for someone else this may not be something, that they feel afraid for someone else this may be something that they feel like is not a big deal, but again I had to make that clear why for me this is something that makes me afraid or that I am, showing courage in. So that is sort of why you see that repetition of the word fear. Like I'm making very clear in this second paragraph that, I'm attaching mine into a controversy. Um, I'm afraid. I fear this. I fear that. So that is sort of again targeting my response to the question itself. And lastly, I think you kind of see the variety in the word count. It can be as short as 100 words and as long as 250. When you have this type of like flexibility, I would recommend, do your best to use all of the word count because again, this is not like a space that you're going to ever have time or like have the opportunity to, submit something again. So in the cases where you have this level of flexibility, do your best to draft per the maximal. Um, that was that. Um, this was my second supplement. So again, same thing. I'm gonna give people like a couple minutes to read and then we will discuss. Again, please use the chat feature when you finish. Okay. For this question. I think this is a question that is relatively, I've seen a couple other schools ask as well, pick one person in history or fiction. Why would you want to talk to them? Explain. I think that this is a question that, again, requires a lot of thinking, and that it's very important to choose someone that, again, sort of aligns with however you've described yourself to be in the personal statement, and, sort of the more like, I guess, unique your person is, kind of the more like your essay will stand out. But by that, I also mean like you shouldn't also feel pressure to come up with someone who no one else will write about. Again, the key is to describe like why you want to talk to them and like what is so important about them. In this sort of essay, I want to like really focus on structure. So as you see, again, this is between 100 to 150 words. What I think sort of what I enjoyed most about like this essay that I wrote is I really like how I kind of made little paragraphs to like move the story along. And I think that is something like not necessarily talked about or not necessarily appreciated until we see the difference. Reading sort of one blob of a paragraph that's 250 words versus reading a couple sentences that are broken down by paragraph, just visually and naturally lets your essay or supplement look like it's progressing and telling a story. And so I would really encourage students to pay attention to, obviously the content of what they're writing, but also like just visually how it looks and stylistically how you can make it easier for the reader to follow along. So for me, sort of this kind of trick of, using small, shorter chunks of text and separating them was something that I thought would help it look like visually my story's progressing and also help me with transitions, right? So for example, here I start this paragraph. I introduce the person I'm focusing on, and then I start my paragraph by saying, from quite a young age, I give background on this. Then I say, today, what's happening today? I talk about that. And then lastly, I sort of end with, like, what would my discussion be about? And again, like, what you can kind of see is I answer the question without specifically saying, like, oh, I want to, you know, I only use the phrase if I were to talk to her, which is from the directly from the question at the end. But otherwise, I'm saying like I wonder this, and I'm specifically repeating that word for emphasis. So I like illustrate again. This is where show not tell comes in. I illustrate like my curiosities. I illustrate sort of what I want to know. I illustrate what I want to talk about without over and over saying, this is the topic I want to talk about, like this is what I want to converse with her about, this is a question, these are the questions that I want to ask. Like I structure it in a way that I'm both giving background and I'm kind of describing like my interests and my goals in speaking to her. And I also make clear why I chose her, right? I chose her because she, like, her background as a refugee who has survived and, an incredibly difficult and horrific time as, someone who's witnessed and been subject to seeing like a war. I, want to talk to her, or I'm interested in her because, she's seen these, for lack of better words, insane things at such a young age in her life. And I just want to get a sense of sort of what her struggles were, what her uh life was like. That's really what I just want to get a sense of. And I think really importantly, why was this important? Or like why did I specifically choose this person? Part of that comes from the fact that, this was someone I actually genuinely was personally interested in. It took me some time to think about it. I didn't necessarily think of her off the top of my head. It took some time for me to, really figure out who I want to talk about. My original person that I chose was Marie Curie, who is like one like a really prominent female scientist, and I originally chose her because, I wanted to go into science and I thought that she would be a good choice. But again, this is what I mean by you don't need to tie yourself to a career. You don't need to tie yourself to a specific pathway. I did not choose Marie Curie, even though, she was a scientist and she was someone who contributed to the sciences. This was despite the fact that I wanted to pursue science. But I chose someone who I thought would be more interesting, who I thought would, align better with like my identity and sort of my background as like a South Asian woman. I chose someone who I thought would be of interest and relevance to Barnard because again, Barnard is a women's college. It's, really is about like a lot of their sort of core missions include like amplifying voices of women, amplifying voices of like diverse communities. And I thought Sharbat Gula, the person who I wrote about, kind of really embodies a lot of those key themes. So again, just going to show the importance of thinking carefully about these types of questions, how they align with yourself, and how they align with the school. Okay. And then this is the last example of mine. So again, just a few minutes for everyone to read and then discuss. And again, when people are done, if they could just throw it in the chat. Okay. This is sort of another very classic question that, I had to sort of face when writing my supplements, and so I thought it would be a good example for everyone. Um, This is a very common question. Why X school? I think something very common that I see students fall into the trap of doing is that in order to answer this question, they pick and choose like five, three, four, five things about the school. The school has a great, a cappella program. The school has a great science program. I'm interested in a cappella and science. I'm also interested in, the school's alums who have done XYZ in their fields. I'm also interested in the school's campus life and diversity. And I think students, want to fit in as much information as they can, and I understand why. But what ends up happening, especially when you have such little space, is that the more sort of topics that you try to cover, the more superficial your essay seems because you're squeezing in so many different things together that at the end of reading your essay, I'm sort of left confused, not knowing what's the most important to you. There's simply not enough space to talk about multiple things. So my advice for why X school, especially for something that, is around this length, is choose one sort of core aspect of the school and just elaborate on that. Choose one thing that you really want to anchor and focus your essay on and dive deep. This is also something that I learned from a Tufts University information session. They said, don't go wide, like go deep. So don't try to cover every little aspect of the school. Instead, really hone in and focus on one aspect that you want to focus on. And just logically, that makes sense, right? Imagine you read an essay that is covering five different topics versus reading an essay that covers one. Chances are, when you walk away from those both essays, the one that has five topics, you might remember like two out of five or three out of five. There are going to be some things that you just don't remember because they didn't have the time to go as deep, they didn't have the time to impact you. Whereas the essay focusing on one sole topic in extreme detail, you're going to remember what that essay was about. It's going to stick in your head. It's going to be more memorable. So that's exactly sort of the point and what I mean by by going deep and not wide. The more you try to cover, it can often have the opposite effect where it just dilutes everything and makes everything look weaker. So for me specifically, that is why I sort of focused on their you know, just basic curriculum and the diversity in the curriculum and the fact that that diversity will allow me to like just get a broader sense of really different topics and that sort of breadth in courses and that diversity also really mirrors like the fact that Barnard is in the heart of New York. So as you can see, sort of the anchoring of my text was really this paragraph about the courses and how they would broaden my perspective. And then sort of around that, I just have a quick little like connection that, this reflects its values of being a city and of being an institution in the heart of New York. But then again, the crux of my essay is around like their coursework. And actually, I also like wanted to show you guys this because this is something that I don't recommend people doing. Like obviously, I was interested in medicine from the time that I was applying to college. So that sort of lens came out that I want to, like organize clinics and like do global health. And that is still true today. But I think that even this is too specific for a college level essay saying that, I want to organize like nonprofits in the medical space. I would say it's too specific for a college level essay. So again, like goes to show that there's room for improvement for everyone. Um, so with that, so these sort of have finished the examples that I wanted to go through. And there are a couple other examples that I wanted to show on what can be worked on. So this is a student's like attempt at a draft for Columbia. And I'm just going to give people a couple minutes to read through this. And again, we're going to go through the same thing, describe what they've done well, and sort of describes what needs work, just so that everyone has a sense of what we can do better. And again, once people are done, they can use the chat. And again, once people are done, they can just put in the chat. Okay, so I've sort of written some comments here on the side, but I thought it would just be helpful to go over this. As you can see, this is sort of the type of essay that is talking about like multiple things, and because of that, doesn't have the opportunity to go in depth. So the question was, what do you value most about Columbia and why, in 300 words or less? So basically, like a why Columbia question, like why do you want to go to Columbia? What's most important to you about it? And again, they kind of choose a lot of different topics, but because there's so many topics, the it's a very cursory and sort of superficial take, right? It's the greatest cities, countless values define its people. Um, what are one of those many values, but doesn't actually specify what those values even are. Here, sort of, it's determined to give its students the best education, um, not simply by their grades or scores, but by their potential to succeed. You can really say this for any school, right? Any school is, especially nowadays, all schools are having like a holistic admissions process, not necessarily focusing as much on pure numbers, but looking at a lot of different components. So again, this is not specific. Then this is kind of bringing in a alum and kind of quoting them, but doesn't really go in deep, further detail, and just sort of says the purpose of the school is for students to discover themselves. Again, I really can say this for any school. Then they're talking about their time at the campus and about the environment, but again, not as specific about what was unique about the students that they met, etc. Um, so this is sort of an example of why going broad can sort of end up backfiring because you are trying to cover too much in a very small amount of space. Um, okay, so then another another piece that I want to focus on is I think this is a little bit of a better essay. Um, okay. So again, I'll give students, everyone here, a couple minutes to read this, and then we can go ahead and proceed. There should be a feature allowing you to zoom in on your screen. Again, I wanted the whole prompt to be visible, but now I'm gonna have to scroll down. So just let me know when people are done reading this first chunk. I just scrolled down to the last paragraph. Okay. So, as you can see, first of all, this essay had a greater word count, allowing the student to kind of, you know, bring in the narrative and then ultimately focus on whatever they wanted to focus. But as you can sort of see, the main focus is sort of her interest in education, science, and research. So they sort of start off with like a interesting like story-like situation that, how they started going about being interested in biodiversity, natural sort of phenomena, etc. And then they talk about the American Museum of Natural History and their time there, its value and importance to them, that it is biology. So again, they didn't necessarily and this student specifically, I know, like, did internships and things like that at the American Museum of Natural History. But again, that's not really regurgitated here. What's regurgitated here is their not involvements or not academic demands, but rather their experience, what they took away from that time. It wasn't like what they got out of it. It wasn't the fact that they, published a poster, or it wasn't the fact that they did 80 hours or did 4 weeks of full-time, research. It was the fact that it brought them into this sort of world of biodiversity, nature, and biology. And then they connect that to Penn. So at Penn, what do they want to do? They want to engage themselves the same way they engage themselves as a child into biology. Um, and they want to do that through multiple things: a research program, the curve program, through the mentors, through courses like immunobiology, computational biology, and while they also do sort of broaden and start talking about the fact that there are also liberal arts curriculums and there are science enthusiasts, but ultimately, all of this is just fostering that growth and development in the space of in this space. Okay, and I think probably the last sort of thing that we can talk about is this example. How will you explore the community? How will your identity perspective shape this community? How will it shape your identity? This is an example of like a diversity question. And I think it's really hard for students to think about, what makes them diverse. Again, diversity is more than sort of socio-cultural, socioeconomic background. Again, the key is to just focus on an aspect that you sort of explore amongst yourselves, and talking about what it's taught you and what you want to, bring to it. So this student talks about their passion for combining music with service in their Brooklyn community and connects that to the opportunity to play in Penn's band and music mentoring program. So there's a direct connection between what they do in their free time and at Penn. Um, and they, talk about the fact that this is something that allowing them to combine their interests. It's something that will allow them to contribute to Penn as they bring their musical identity and contributions to the institution, um, and allow them to explore, just not only music, but other opportunities through service. So I wanted to show this example because a lot of students kind of just feel like, if I'm not from a specific cultural background, um, if I'm not from a specific geographical background, like what do I write? This is just showing you exactly my point, which is you don't need to feel like you belong to a specific background to successfully answer this question. With 3 minutes remaining, I sort of wanted to just give people an opportunity to ask questions. Someone asked about the recording. The recording will be shared, if it is shared through Francis and Ben, the managers, and sorry, the founder of Kweller and the manager respectively. They should have access to it. I believe it should be shared, but that's sort of out of my hands. That's something administrative that I don't deal with, unfortunately. So I'm not sure. But if it is sent, it will be sent to individuals. Yeah, sure. You can contact Francis or Ben, the manager, and they can guide you. Alrighty, well, I see people are leaving the meeting and we only have 1 minute left. So I just want to thank everyone for their time and participation and looking forward to seeing people at the next future sessions. And I hope that this was helpful. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of your day.